Torgeir Waterhouse has joined us, as he also has the previous days at Nordic Edge Expo. Torgeir is a partner of consultant company Otte, and also board member of Nordic Edge Expo, or Nordic Edge, that is. And you're also a frequent user of urban micromobility services.
Yes, I am. And that's because they provide a solution to a problem, which is simply being somewhere else than you have to be.
But there also causes problems, don't they?
Yeah, sure, everything does. People cause problems.
People do. But you're addressing this issue today with your guest.
Yes, we are. Thank you. And Harald Søvereid, you are the CEO and a co-founder of Nivel Regulator. And you are one of the many companies, many initiatives, many sort of thought environments, I would say, that are trying to solve some of the issues that arise from a technology shift, basically. Because every time we put new technology to use, there are some consequences, both positive and negative. And there are issues that are easy to solve and issues that are hard to solve. And I'd like to sort of start out this talk with you giving a very brief and quick description of the tool you provide. How we did see something in the film here, but what is it?
Yeah, that was more about the impact of it all. But we saw that when the micromobility services started approaching the cities, and the different cities didn't know necessarily how to respond to it, and they were kind of responding in the old-fashioned way with paper analog regulations, or forbidding them, or not doing anything, just like overflooding the streets. And we thought we should do this better. We should give the cities a tool so they can kind of respond to the micromobility operators in the same way as they do, because they are really good at like their fleet optimization and everything, getting the best out of every vehicles, making most money. But a city has other needs to consider. They have to consider all the different like citizens and everything, and they should get an equally good and flexible tool for actually putting the regulations on board. So we developed this tool that enables or employs a two-way data exchange. So on one side, the city administrators draw zones with different rules and stuff on it, and push that to the operators, and the operators push back data on their scooters, where they are, what the state they are in, and everything like that. And from that you can
So basically someone in the public, the correct public governing body, can draw on a map a region, say this it can be 1 square foot, it can be a huge area, and say for now, for next hour or next 10 days or whatever, you cannot park here, or you must park here if you're going to park somewhere in the city center. And then that data will flow to the scooters systems, or whatever vehicle someone is using, and that will have an impact directly on how and when and where you can park.
Yeah, so the scooter operators implement these new rules in their systems and then communicate that to their end users. So if there is like a no parking zone, for instance, you'll not be able to end your ride.
So basically this is a tool to implement through technology the regulations you have, either they are temporary or permanent in a city space.
Yeah, so the city can respond to how the behavior is of the different operators, but also of the end users. As we saw in Bergen, that suddenly some kids were starting to use riding over the football fields and destroying these football fields, and then they just implemented no-go zones on all football fields, and they kind of removed that problem.
And that's a very good example, actually, because a lot of the time we see that technology is used in ways we didn't foresee. And therefore you haven't told people about it, or to avoid it, you haven't regulated it, you haven't whatever. And we need to learn from dynamically what is going on, and then use that to implement and improve both regulation and our communication, etc. So on a technical level, you are looking into solving this. One of the things I find interesting in this field is that everybody's talking about scooters. But is there a reason this should be sort of just about scooters, or can you foresee a way of using technology like this on anything that moves, or for that matter stand still?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's what we're doing is basically regulating like IoT devices that is sending a signal, and then we are giving them some rules so that they have to adhere to. So we can do this for any mobility options, including drones or taxis or even cars. So and we see that this market is maturing now, and when the cars arrived like 100 years ago, the market was also really immature, and there were cars all over the place, and cities, they're like walking pedestrians were not, and the cars, they didn't know how to kind of find their place on the street level, and we see the same problems now. But now, of course, we have a much more dynamic tool, so we can actually invoke these regulation much faster and more digital.
Yeah, and respond to temporary needs.
Definitely.
It could be a fire somewhere, and you can divert traffic.
And I perfectly understand, because it's about like a digital matureness, and if it's hard for like a city administrator to see like all the possibilities in this, and then you respond to it in the old-fashioned way, that where you say, okay, we don't want this between this and this hour, like we want to close it during the night, for instance. And then suddenly you can see that, it wasn't a problem with drunk driving at 12 o'clock, but it was like already at 9 o'clock. And if not, the digital rules are in place for that, you cannot kind of respond to that as fast as you want.
Well, and this is quite important because, as you said, a lot of the times the regulators aren't aware of what issues might arise. And you mentioned the car's history, and cars being everywhere. If you go way back to the first car accident, actually, the first person being hit by a car, that ended up with a huge problem because it wasn't regulated up front which responsibility the driver should have. So that the first time a car hit a person and that person was injured, the driver was not held responsible because the regulation wasn't there. And that is, of course, a quite extreme example, but the underlying idea here is that you're talking about, as I understand it, is that with a tool like this, you're able to adapt how you regulate in practice, depending on what's going on.
Yeah. And of course, it must be supported with a like overall rules, and so that the city actually have an authority or the autonomy to actually control their own public space, because we see like in some countries you don't necessarily have that route because of national rules are too strict, or they don't let the cities actually control the cityscape, and we of course think that the city should have the autonomy to decide on how the public space should be utilized between like cars and pedestrians and bicyclists and micromobility users, but also local businesses like street cafes and or other businesses, because we are all like sharing the same public space.
So basically you could also actually have this on chairs, because the cafe can
it's
be...
not a problem because they are not floating around that much. So, but they are they are regulated. There is a fee for a street cafe today. There is a fee for a fruit stand. So, but when it comes to like floating vehicles like scooters, it's much harder to kind of calculate that. But as we have access to all these data from the scooter operators, we can actually calculate the fee, and that could be dynamically changed depending on the behavior. So if there are too many scooters on the city square, we can increase the fee so that it won't be that attractive to put out too many scooters. And vice versa, you can say, okay, if there's an area with like a poor public transport offer, you can put out like a subsidized zone, or at least a zone with no fee, in order to kind of stimulate for a better mobility service.
And now you're entering into a very important part of the discussion surrounding these systems and the use of scooters and whatever, the fee structure. Because what happens here is that the city can also use your system to keep track of where the scooters are, where they're parked, where they're driven, and that again can be used go into how they charge the companies for using the public space.
Definitely. And so our system is like relating to the scooter operators, and then the scooter operators are relating to their end users. So, but So that means that the scooter operators can, of course, incentivize their users to say, okay, we don't want you to park here in this square at the moment. If you do that, it will cost you like a little bit more. Or if you park over there, you will be charged like €1 less or something like that. So you can get all this dynamic into play.
If you look at how you've seen this space develop, and you have experience from cities all around in several countries, if you were to combine certain ways of regulating, certain ways of handling this into sort of this super city, what 3 or 4 or whatever number of details and pointers and ways of solving whatever would you sort of combine into this super city where
yeah. Well, yeah, it's a matter of as we talked about, that we have to kind of balance all the different needs and to kind of to see what kind of usages the city has. But I think like one of the most important thing is that the cities actually are demanding, because the scooter operators say we're delivering a free service to the city. Yes, of course, but you're still like utilizing the public space, and you cannot like overutilize it. So you have to kind of require, if you're writing good, the overall regulation that you have to write should be like you should share data. You should, of course, pay the fees and apply to the rules, and you should update your rules as we go along.
when needed. You said share data, and then we're talking about data about the vehicles and not the users.
Yeah, we're not getting any end user data about the vehicles. No, about the like every user. So it's all like aggregated in that sense, or yeah, anonymized. So, but we are looking into how we can make it even better when it comes to privacy concerns. So that a city that integrate with us should be like a fully GDPR compliant.
Looking back in history, and again, as you mentioned, cars, way back, the concern was the amount of horse dumpings in the streets. Then the cars came and solved that problem, basically. And then in the UK, the Parliament voted and implemented what was called the Locomotives Act, which stated, because the idea was that cars are dangerous. And that was, of course, something that was lobbied by the railroad companies and the horse taxi carriage companies. And the regulation was that in front of every self-propelled vehicle, someone had to carry a red flag to warn the public about a danger coming. And basically, as I understand what you're doing, is you're trying to empower cities to do the opposite, to actually regulate when needed, to regulate automatically, and to make sure that the city space the use of the city space is balanced.
Yeah, that's really well put. I couldn't have said it better.
Excellent then. So rounding off, you're in charge, unlimited powers. You can make one decision. What will that be that would improve the city's way of handling this as of right now?
I would say that you shouldn't limit the numbers of scooters in the city as itself, but you should limit the numbers on the local level so that you'll get a good mobility service, but not a problem on a local level.
Excellent. Very good way of using your one-day power. On that note, we're going to go outside where Corinne is standing.